You are listening to Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. Pursuing the RPG hobby with reckless abandon.
Why, hello, and welcome to Season 27, Episode 10 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
Hey ho, I'm Kermit the Frog. I don't know.
All right.
I don't know. I couldn't do it. This is Bill.
I'm Tappy.
I meant to say coming to you from Mordor.
Oh yeah,
What with
you
the
are in the
smoke?
red zone.
Well, I mean, we're not in Oregon. I mean, Oregon is really Mordor.
Yeah, we're like on the outskirts of Mordor, like right, because I'm in Washington, so we're above true Mordor. You're below true Mordor. Yeah, Oregon bad, not good there.
The mornings here are real bad. I mean, it's hard to see the end of the street from the smoke, but it clears out. The wind shifts, and in the afternoon, like when I got home, except for the giant pillar of smoke like 6 miles away, blue sky, couldn't smell smoke. And then just now it started to shift again, and now it's coming back towards us.
Now the Santa Anas start going, and
But the fire has actually straddled the mountain range, and it's now like 6 miles from Palmdale.
Ooh.
wow.
It's across. It's spanned. It's 60,000 acres, and it's at 11% contained or 9% contained, something like that.
And
But it's
you
actually
got the go bag ready, right? You got your
yeah.
dugout bag
Yeah, that's
all set.
All that
Oh,
stuff's
yeah.
ready. Yep. And my laptop.
Yeah,
And
we're
my
we've had
dice.
like badish AQI, like over 200 and stuff. But we actually got rain today. The blessing of Washington. We got rain. And it's supposed to rain this weekend. We're like, oh, look, there's sky up there. Oh God.
I think originally last week they said we were supposed to have rain in a week or so, but I haven't seen any signs of it yet. I think the heat is pushing the clouds away.
That's how that works.
Yeah, sure. All right. In this episode of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast, John from Iowa sends us a comment and counterpoint on free RPG content. That's been a very divisive topic. People are like, hey, I'm offended by that, and then they write in. Dale writes in about hometown gaming, and Eric from New Jersey sends us a horror story, which is my favorite. But first, if you'd like to email us, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. We have a forum, happyjacksforum.com. That's happyjacksforum.com. We're on the social medias. HappyJacksRPG, all in word, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and MeWe. And if you'd like to watch the show live, go to happyjacks.org/live on Fridays at 7:18 p.m. Pacific time, and you can see our faces while we talk at you.
Dude, how is the MeWe community? I know that's your pride and joy.
I haven't logged into that in 5 or 6 months. I don't know.
So super active then.
So it's
Super active.
yeah, blossoming.
Yes.
Running wild.
Right.
I mean, for all you know, it could be.
It might
So you're not.
You gotta go back. It's like 74,000 members. And you're like, oh.
be. That would be funny. I doubt it, but who knows? Maybe. Oh, and by the way, for those of you that care, my second book is out.
Yes.
Nice.
I just got them both on Kindle.
Oh, good. Thank you.
So, I'm supporting your habit.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's become. It's my hobby since we don't have a band right now.
Right, yeah.
Sit and write novels.
Yeah, well, the band was like, oh, man, Stu seems really preoccupied. I'm like, oh, dude, we can't rehearse or perform. He's painting his house and writing books. And
Right. Yeah. My house is
he's-
about a third painted, but then it started getting into the high 90s outside, and it's like, nope, not gonna do it. Not gonna do it.
And you built, like, what, Devil's Tower out of mashed potatoes in your
Yeah,
kitchen?
I did.
All kinds of,
Yep.
oh, yeah.
I did.
Like, what kind of demons do you have in your head that you have to keep yourself this occupied?
I'm always busy doing something. The nice thing about the writing, I mean, I wrote the first book took me a little less than a month. The second book took me 2 weeks to write the first draft, and then I went back and did a couple more rewrites, so it took about a month total. But the third book's done, and it needs to go to proofing, and then I just started the fourth one. I think it's going to be 6 total, maybe. I'm not sure.
So,
And
like, November. You'll be done in November.
Probably by the end of the year.
Just think there's people that are out there like, oh man, I've been struggling so much with writer's block. This dude's like, oh, here we go. Time to crack out some magic.
I wish I'd spent all this time writing songs, Because we could have like 2 or 3 CDs worth of songs right now.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, like, then we can't put them out. We have no way to like actually record them
Right.
unless we do like our crazy like iPhone hackage like we did for the couple of things we put out already.
Yeah.
It's
Although
tough.
some of those sound okay. Some of
Thanks.
those don't sound. Some of those don't. They don't sound like a studio recording, but they don't sound like what you would think it would sound like with a bunch of people recording on their iPhones. You
Yes,
know what I mean?
should. I don't know if you've worked in Adobe Premiere much, but if you have, I should send you the Adobe Premiere file for the Venus, the Quarantine Venus one. Because, boy, that was a lot of work. Let me tell you, just being the guy who did it. Because not only am I doing getting all the video stuff in the right place and how that all comes in, but they have like a rudimentary audio mixing system,
Right.
which I then had to use to actually try to mix everyone's iPhone music. So it was good. It came out all right.
I just canceled my Adobe. What is it? Creative Cloud or whatever it's called. Yeah, because I went from $30 a month to like $55. I'm like, what? And it's like, oh, that's the introductory price for the first year. I'm like, well, then you know what? I'm gonna cancel it, and when I need it again, I'll get it.
Right.
But I haven't used it in like 2 or 3 months. So I'm like,
Yeah, I guess I use it like almost every day, so
See,
I can't, that's why I'm shocked.
I also subscribe to Pro Tools. That's $30 a month as well, and that one I use a lot. Well, I'm not using it right now a lot, but I mean, like the audiobook version of book 1 should be out in like a week and a half, unless they don't like my audio quality and they want me to like make it louder or quieter or something.
And you got like a really high end professional voice talent to do that,
Me,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, you.
But the reason I mention this, if you're too cheap to go out and get it when it comes out, you can just go to stuvenable.com, and I'm rolling out 2 chapters a week as a podcast, and it's on iTunes.
Oh, nice.
If you search for Mandight, MANDIGHT on iTunes, you can subscribe to it and listen to it gratis. So it took a long time to record. It took a really long time to record, and you'll find out now as I sit here and extemporaneously read this email. Hi there, happy jackers. Oh, this is a comment and counterpoint on free RPG content from John in Iowa. Hey there, happy jackers. John from Iowa here. I hope you're all faring well in these difficult times. A few episodes ago, session 26, episode 18, a listener wrote in on the topic of free/cheap games, commenting on how, see right there, I would have had to gone back and re-edit. Commenting on how it took me an hour per chapter, and some of my chapters are only 3 pages long. Commenting on how underpriced most RPG content is. The email went on to speculate that this is because most RPGers are cheapskates who don't like to pay for good content, and as a result, artists and content creators don't really make enough off their work. I'd like to offer a counterpoint to this opinion and clear up some misconceptions regarding the benefits and detriments of quote-unquote free content. This is a somewhat common sentiment in the RPG community that free content is ruining the industry. That is also in quotes. Some will use the word hurting instead of ruining. That, in my opinion, is extremely misguided. Nothing could be further from the truth. Literally nothing.
Nothing.
Of course, the earth is flat is more truthful than that statement.
Yes. Banana pants, monkey brain. Truer than that statement.
Of course, I have nothing against the last part of the email. Yes, it is true that artists and content creators don't make enough money from their work. I'd be hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't think these people should get paid more. However, the reason for this is not because RPGers are a bunch of cheapskates. The truth is, all people are cheapskates, and it's human nature that when all else is equal, we'll go for cheaper, free options. Any industry has to live with that. If anything, people in the RPG community are less so, since we're the kind of consumers that will constantly spend money on things we really don't need. No, not RPGers. I have exactly the number of dice I need, and that's it. It's all I own.
That's all.
On things we really don't need. Just think about how many RPG products you own versus how many you've played. I feel attacked.
I don't know if that paragraph really helps the argument, though.
In my opinion, the RPG is an underpaid industry for two main reasons. One, the market is quite simply too small. That's absolutely true. There are not enough people to sell to. The RPG market is even smaller when you consider that the vast majority of it is dominated by a single product. We all know which one. The market is...
Big eye, small mouth.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
Can't get away from that fucking game.
Oh, Jesus. The market is oversaturated. This is number two, his second point. The market is oversaturated, i.e. the ratio of content creators to content consumers is probably 1-to-1. I put that in myself. Is too large. The supply is too big for the demand, and that invariably drives the prices down. Even so, it is important to note that overall the RPG industry is bigger today than it was in the 80s or 90s. There are a lot more opportunities to create and sell content. However, I think our expectations of it have grown faster than what the actual market can support, hence the oversaturation mentioned in part 2. Now, where do free games enter into this? The superficial analysis might tell you that it is because of free games, or more specifically open source licensed games like the OGL, that we're in this predicament, i.e. the oversaturation of the market. And that's partially true. If anybody can just freely copy and publish things online, it's going to lead to oversaturation. But it's also the reason behind the explosion of RPGs in the last 2 decades. The OSR and PBTA craze, much of the indie scene, even WotC's huge popularity, would not be possible without benefits of open source licenses. I don't know if WotC also ended up creating their biggest competitor by having an OGL in Paizo.
Sure, yeah.
People initially questioned the place of open source software, but now most agree that their benefits far outweigh the detriments, which are few indeed. Just like the software industry, the RPG industry benefits from positive network externality. I
like it better your way.
Externality?
Yeah.
And right there, I'd have to go back and re-record. I.e., the more people are in it, the more beneficial it is to the industry. And that's what free and or open source content does. It increases network externality. I still don't know what network externality means. The increase in user base, regardless of how that increase happened, invariably leads to more profits. In conclusion, the answer to making an RP industry more profitable for individuals and companies alike is not so much asking for people's charitable support, because that's ultimately fruitless, but using the power of free games to entice new people into the hobby. We should actively encourage people to play and maintain the popularity of free games so that their user base grows. For the same reasons, content creators should be encouraged to make at least part of their products open source so the entire community can benefit. Sincerely, John from Iowa. P.S. While I'm a very strong advocate for free content, there's obviously a balance to how much of it should be versus paid. Not everything will be free. A lot of successful small companies have adopted the practice of making their core rules free while selling supplements and adventure modules. That seems to work well for them. P.P.S. I realize I've based part of my argument on an analogy between RPGs and software, and understand that analogy isn't perfect. However, I think the two industries share enough in common for the argument to be sensible. After all, the benefits that the RPG industry has had are a result of the OGL, quite similar to the benefits the software industry has as a result of the open source movement. The OGL was inspired by the open source movement, and both enable similar business models. PPPS, drink and have fun. Thoughts?
I will drink and have fun.
I'm going to go get a drink.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, I need to actually go get a drink.
Don't forget, it's New Year's Eve for our Jewish listeners.
Oh, that's right.
So I've got, if you're gonna get your drinks, you go get them. I am having this amazing bourbon whiskey, Deceptivus. Not that that's anything about the date, but it's fantastic. It's in Portuguese port barrels. So I will wax philosophical now while the other lads are gone. So while I have you, and it's just us having our conversation, I do think that there is an awful lot of RPGs out there. I've just started, Elspeth and I have just started our own company and started publishing our own stuff. If you play Traveller and would like to support that, I encourage you go to up to that fine distributor of RPG content, Drive Through RPG. And if you just search for Knights of Solaris, like Medieval Knights with a K, you will find our basically career path book for Traveller that lets you bring in sun sword wielding wizardy characters set in a Traveller timeline. Sweet Jamesons. So I've been doing a lot of dipping into not just playing RPGs, but what does it take to be writing supplements or writing systems and publishing those. And there is a staggering amount of content. If you're on Twitter and kind of get into the TTRPG Twitter feeds, I mean, and it's inventive and smart and cool, and a lot of it is just out there as part of jams and part of people like putting stuff out to just drive viewers for Patreon, which maybe isn't free, right? But it's certainly not the traditional methodology of creating and selling those. It is too much to keep up with, right? There was a couple of like amazing bundles that got put together that actually had hundreds of tabletop RPG pieces in them, right? More than you could ever play in your lifetime,
Right.
Unless you're basically like playing every night and you're like, okay, here's the one shot. Okay, here's the next one shot. Here's the next one shot.
But you have to learn the system well enough to run it as well.
Right.
So.
Well, the thing that's interesting is an awful lot of the free things are either based off of a commonality of systems, right? So
That's true.
They're apocalypse hacks, right? Or, whoa, Tappy, are you just happy to see us, or what's going on there, man? Hello.
Your Cthulhu penis is showing.
Or they're like these like simple, like there's pamphlet tabletop RPGs, or like one-side RPGs where you can get them and like you can play them in no time at all.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. There's like a whole it's somewhere on the internet. There's a whole page, a whole catalog of one-page RPGs.
Right. And that's all pretty much free content. We're like right now in my home game group, we actually we had a campaign going for a while of Starfleet, of Star Trek Adventures, sorry. And so now what we've been doing is we were like, hey, let's play some one-shots or some like 2 evening session games. And so I've been running a hack called Cozy Town, which is basically a hack of The Quiet Year.
Oh, cool.
And as opposed to, there's this impending thing that's going to happen. You have this quiet year before the end of everything occurs, or whatever usually happens in the quiet year. This one's all about like everything you do is to make things like colorful and cheery and happy. And so like we're in Mossy Beddington, and Twig Top is like the big tree where we're all anthropomorphic animals. Like it's just like the warmest, fuzziest, cutest thing ever, right? And it was just like, I literally went on Google and said like great one-shot games. It's like, and the vast majority of them are free.
Yeah.
Right. So, if that is your jam, right, writing free stuff and putting it out there, there's a huge distribution at itch.io. Like there's a massive way to get that in front of people.
Oh yeah.
But boy, is it a super noisy market.
Yeah.
Right. It's like if you're making mobile games, right? There's thousands of mobile games that get released every day across platforms, right? Which is why, the real expense of making a mobile game, to dip into my video game side for a minute, is user acquisition. Is once the game's out, is getting people in, right? Because their monetization is get as many people on top of the funnel for free as possible, because you want to like get money out of them, and the like 1/10 of 1% that's going to ridiculously pay you,
or ad revenue,
right? Or ad revenue, or it is like tabletop RPGs don't have those mechanics, right? There's no monetization model for a free RPG that comes out unless you're trying to build up enough of a fan base that when you then come out with something that costs, people are going to buy it.
Right. I mean, that's almost kind of the Savage Worlds model. It wasn't free, But the Savage Worlds Explorer Edition, $9.95, a complete RPG for $10. That, I mean, now compared to free, that's a lot of money. But compared to most RPGs that cost money, if you were on a budget and you'd heard of it, you'd get it right away.
But let's be honest, though. How many people are named Shane Hensley out there?
Right.
So, like,
Some number, but not a lot.
Yeah.
Turns
I
out
mean, it is a non-zero number, right? So, like, not a lot of people can do that. If you're looking to actually, like, make a living off of your RPGs, you know, you have, like, if you release one-shots, you're never gonna. If you release one-shots for like 25 cents, you're not gonna make any money.
Right.
Right. Any money whatsoever is not gonna do anything. So then, if you go towards like actually making a game, like Bill, you got a lot of experience in like video games, but me, I've been an independent contractor since like the 20th century. So, like for me, when I'm trying to figure out how much I charge for something, I have to figure out my daily rate. If you have any rate when it comes to an RPG, you have to get paid for it. So you can't do a one shot. You can't do the easy things that get out that don't take any time. You have to actually put time into developing it. Hey Stu, how much time did you have to put into developing your RPG?
Oh fuck, 5 years. It took me 5 years. I wasn't working on it full time, obviously, but
Right.
I probably have 300 hours in it.
And that's the rub, right? Is that like who can really be working on it as their full-time job, right? Because it's not driving revenues. Like to me, one of the you have to look at the ways to actually monetize off of tabletop RPGs. Have that in my mind be your end goal, and then you're using like that, like you're investing your time, to your point, Tappy, right? Your hourly that you would normally be playing things into creating this like compelling, interesting free content to get as many people as possible interested into what your next thing is. So when you start your Patreon or do your Kickstarter or whatever it is, you've got that built-in base for like, oh yeah, I did this and this and this, and I love what this person does. I want to support them, and I'm going to get in their Kickstarter. Like that, in my mind, is where that becomes useful in terms of how do I turn that into money.
Right. But then you have to stand out and have people know who you are, like you were saying before with mobiles. And
Yep.
if you are not a marketing genius or don't have lots of money,
Or the time to do it, because it takes probably as much time to promote something as it does to create it.
yeah.
Mhm.
I'm complete shit at promoting. Like when I had my own like sushi catering business, I closed that shit in 6 months because I'm not good at it. Well, 9/11 also happened, so that didn't help. But marketing is really, really difficult and takes up even more time. So if you're creating great free content, how do you make it stand out if there's this glut of all of this other stuff? And it's even in places, how do people even know to look for it? Like this guy is saying, it gets new people into the hobby. I mean,
If
things
they
like Critical Role get new people into the hobby, I think.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, like and it's interesting, like where they found a way to monetize RPGs is not by making them.
right.
Right. It's almost like in a lot of ways, if you think about it, it's like professional sports, right? Like Abner Doubleday didn't make a bunch of money, but boy, people that play baseball sure do.
Right.
Right. The guy who first hung up some peach baskets against a piece of wood to throw a ball into didn't become rich, but Allen Iverson did pretty good. Like it's that kind of thing where sometimes it's the players of those games, right, that find a way to monetize that. I think it's super interesting because there's this back and forth, like without in some of those cases, without that original content to leverage off of, without the games to play, the people that play them then don't get that level, of an opportunity to do well in that space. And it's really hard. I mean, it's for anybody that's sat down, even just like tried to write or come up with a game system, or how would I describe doing this, right? It is a ton of work, a ton of work. Even if you're doing something as simple, air quotes, as I'm doing a Dungeon World hack, right? I'm doing a Powered by the Apocalypse game. I'm doing something based off of Fate, where there's a rule set that's there, or an OGL type game. That's still a ton of work, even if you aren't creating a new system from whole cloth.
Right.
And you almost have to, somehow capture lightning in a bottle because you made something that somehow stood out. And to your point, Tappy, the problem with that is like, how do you get that level of noise, right? I mean, it's almost like it's like almost any entertainment industry. You kind of got to know somebody, right? Mm-hmm. Like if I was writing something like a campaign or whatever, you got to spend a ton of time on social media. Hopefully, I think in some ways, find someone who's got an audience who likes what you're doing and might give you a shout out.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I used to think that like, oh, I have a lot of followers on Twitter, and I get 2,400. Big deal. I love everybody who like ever replies to any stupid tweet I put out. Right. But then I look at other people and I'm like, oh, who's this person? Wow, they have like,
18 million.
27,000. 143,000 followers. Like, all right, that's like that level of beyond and beyond, right? And look, I'm an old white guy, right? I'm happy that I can, still remember how to launch a browser and, and go online and do stuff. Like that connection, that savvy is so important to building that brand, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So if you're doing free stuff, like I love it, and I try to play it, and I like what they have now. Is there's a lot of these free RPGs that come out that give you the opportunity to like tip the creator. Mm-hmm. It's like, look, if you want to get it because you don't have money, like that's cool, go ahead and take it. But hey, if you want to throw a couple bucks at my coffee account, or you want to leave a tip for the creator because it's through itch.io or whatever, like, at least there's something.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. Like in this email, one of the things that I think he was trying to say was like for his argument, but I think it was against it. Where let's see if I can go to that. Everyone is cheapskate. So if there's anything free, everybody will just take the free stuff. Well,
all other things being equal.
Yeah. And so with that being said, though, if you're using that as a model, then free stuff really is a detriment to people who are trying to put the time and effort to make games, but aren't necessarily like, well-established game designers.
I don't know if I agree with that statement because sometimes, I mean, like if you're going to do something and it's something that's critical to you, let's say you're a graphic designer. You're going to go out and you're going to get Adobe Creative Suite rather than use GIMP. Because GIMP does what it can do, and if you get good at it, you can probably be as proficient as you could be in Photoshop. But you never know how long GIMP is going to be there, and if the people who have been making it for free for all these years may someday throw up their hands and say, I can't do this anymore, I got another job or whatever. And suddenly it's no longer supported, and then they find out, it's got vulnerabilities in it, and next thing you know, it's dangerous software to run. Something like that. And I think that may be one of the reasons. D&D has its market share for a lot of reasons. It was first, and that's probably the biggest one. But the other thing is, a lot of stuff comes out to support it. I mean, in 5th edition, little of that stuff is coming out of WotC. But if you go back to 1st or 2nd edition D&D, you had, here's your 3 big books. Oh, here's a Fiend Folio. Oh, here's something else with more character classes in it. Oh, here's a bunch of modules that we're coming out with, probably 5 or 6 a year. And having that level of support for it, I think that may be one of the reasons why D&D has remained as popular, and the reason Paizo has been able to maintain their market share is because of the fact that they're supporting their games. It's not like I'm going to come out with a one shot and it's going to be there. It's like if you want to invest in a game and make that game the hobby, not just RPGs, picking D&D or Pathfinder could be kind of attractive because new stuff is going to be coming out, more interesting things that might help you come up with new adventure ideas or new new campaign ideas and stuff like that. So I mean, sure, all things being equal, you're going to pick free. But if it's an investment, if it's something that you're going to want to do a lot of, it's going to be something that you're going to want sort of the knowledge base of it to grow over time. And I mean, you're not going to get that out of a single sheet free one-shot RPG, or not a one-shot RPG, but a single sheet RPG or something for free. Go ahead, Debbie.
Well, yeah. I think that's what's important about like development, because those RPGs have many years of iterative development where they're like, oh, that didn't work, let's do this. Oh, that really didn't fucking work, let's do this. And now we're on to 5th edition, where you have people who are in there who've probably been playing it most of their lives, who have really like the time and effort to like figure out, what do systems do? Why do we use them? What is fun about them? What isn't fun about them? What is the point of a system? And I think a lot of people make RPGs, especially as a hobby or like starting out or whatever, don't really like have that concept together. And that's why we have a lot of noise where it doesn't really make sense. There's no continuity in anything, because you have all these people just doing all this random stuff. When you have people developing and people who like take the time and effort to learn how to develop games and why you develop games and what a system is supposed to do for you, as opposed to like what numbers you think it should do or how your brain works. I think then you start getting elegant systems. Then you start getting stuff where people are excited about it and want to jump onto it. Like the concepts behind Apocalypse World are very different than most other games. And there's, a one-page, this is why I made this game. And it's very kind of simple and specific for that style of game. And I think he really knew the type of flow and the type, like why he wanted the system to work the way it did. And that's why it's super popular. But I think at least 90% of the Apocalypse World hacks are complete crap and don't really understand why that system is so elegant, why it works so well, why it gets out of the way of your role playing. And so games like that should be monetized and have people jump onto it and, try and have that iterative design and get better and better. But it's too chaotic. Like, I don't really know how to. I mean, part of the trouble, I think, is people who talk about role-playing games. We don't have a good way of critiquing games. Like, what's good about this game? Why do you like Starfleet Adventures? What specifically? How does it support you? How does it get it out of the way of your role-playing? How does it make it so that the game is fun? I don't think we really have that vocabulary, especially in the role-playing community at large. We just have things like hippie games or crunchy games or whatever games.
We're not good. We're not. This is not a hobby that's good at vocabulary words.
Right.
You ask anyone, they've all got different definitions.
It's not good at creating a synopsis, right? It's not good at and some of the words we choose are really insular, right? It's like if you were like, oh, tabletop game, crunchy, like hippie, like what does that even mean?
Right.
I mean, it's something that any gaming struggles with. The other thing too, like you were talking about, like things just being a mess, right? Like just the market data for the tabletop RPG industry is a disaster, right? There's no codified reporting structure, right? In video games, there are like specific groups that this is what they do, and they gather all the data, and they gather from retail, and they get and you can get complete market sizes, and it's like half of what comes out through tabletop is like it's guesswork, right? They're part of they're like all print media, right? So they come through like a 3-tier distribution network. You got, like Drive-Thru RPG or like Paizo sells directly or people sell independently, right? And a lot of these companies don't report their sales,
right?
Like they don't formally release data. Like Drive-Thru RPG doesn't formally release data.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy shit! I didn't know that.
Well, you can find out what you sold.
Gotta, you'd have to what you did.
Right.
But there's no way to go and say like, oh, how many units of what was sold through here in any kind of, broadly drawn in fashion. There's a great market research firm called ICV2.
Yeah.
Which does market reports. on stuff like their latest for spring of 2020. Like they put out like, here's the top 5 role-playing games in the Hobby Channel. It reflects sales. But those charts are based on interviews with retailers, distributors, and manufacturers. Interviews, not data that's reported out anywhere.
Right.
Oh,
Right?
wow.
So they got to go and like, hey, we're going to start like having some correspondence with people and get some, and okay, well, number 1 was D&D, and number 2 was Pathfinder, and number 3 was 5e compatible stuff, and number 4 was Starfinder, and number 5 was Cyberpunk. There's our top 5 list.
Right.
Based on like emails and phone calls.
Mhm.
Like, so even knowing, you know, like, and you can kind of dissect it more. Like there's a company, the ORR group, puts out a report every quarter around what gets played on Roll20, right, where they can get some data. And they'll show you of the people that are playing, like, you know, campaigns on Roll20, here's the percentage of the systems they use. Like, there's no good way, right? We used to talk about this on the video game side in terms of when we were trying to convince people, like, PC gaming is huge. You keep hearing how PC is dead, but PC gaming is huge. The difference is there's no app store reporting for PC gaming, right? Like Blizzard doesn't put out their numbers for, you know, in detail around Hearthstone or WoW or anything, and you multiply that across, you know, World of Tanks and, like, you know, any big popular online PC based game you can think of. There's no codified reporting for that. Unlike if you subscribe to App Annie and you can, like, every day, like twice, 3, 4 times a day, you're like, oh, here's the update on what every game in the App Store did. I know exactly their unit sales. I know exactly what they made. You know, I can check KPIs against key performance indicators against it. It's like there's so much more information there, right? And we just don't have that in the RPG space. So there's all these, you kind of don't, all you know is that, like, the 2 or 3 games you hear about a lot must be the big dogs, right? It's D&D, it's Paizo, and then you're probably down into, like, Savage Worlds, you know, maybe.
Well, I
maybe
brought up
Cthulhu.
ORR. I brought up the ORR thing.
Yeah.
This is last year's numbers. 51% was D&D 5e.
Yeah, I have the spring 2020 report, Q2 2020. 53% was D&D 5e.
And was the next one uncategorized?
And then uncategorized is just then taking everything that
That's
doesn't fall
helpful.
into a category, right? And then it's like Call of Cthulhu, Pathfinder 2nd Edition, 3.5, Warhammer, World of Darkness. But I mean, the difference is D&D 5e, 53%. Uncategorized, 16.52.
Right.
Wow.
Pathfinder, which we all like, Pathfinder, man, they did 4%. 4% of Roll20 games are Pathfinder, right? So it's just like, you've got D&D, and then it's like everybody else duking it out, right? But the thing I actually like is that there are a lot of people with all these kind of things stacked against you that are finding ways to go out there and do stuff, right? And there are some people that are even doing, like, it's like that day job, and then I play in a band at night, and my day job is I make 5e supplements because I know I can go make a lot of money.
Right.
I can make some money off of those. Then I'm doing my passion project and putting out my system, right, or my other stuff, or, you know, and it's really tough, right? Because it's a you know, Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, to some degree, all respects, right? It's where everything came from, right? It was in terms of tabletop role playing game, it was the first one out. But boy, at the same time, it's like super polarizing, and, you know, it can be a really tough community to watch people engaging. You know, and there's such incredible inventive work being done. You know, even to the point, like, one thing I've started really getting into is single player RPGs, journaling RPGs, where basically it self guides you through like creating a world or character, but it's all you. And you get to the end, and you're like, oh wow, I just kind of got guided through a story. That was really cool, right? The concept of what RPG means, you know, when we talk about hippie games, has, like, really broadened, and there's some just, like, fantastic and wonderful things to learn from those. That I do really wish that people that were more entrenched in the standardized, I'm a 5e player, this is how it is, if it's not in the player's handbook, it's crap. Like, those people embrace some of this stuff, because there's, like, really cool storytelling stuff there. And I don't want to believe that, well, every D&D 5e player just cares about loot and, you know, and getting stuff, and they don't really care about stories and characters, because I just don't think that's true. You know, unless, of course, they're, you know, playing through all the pre-gen modules. Like I had my one horrible experience at a con doing.
Right. All right. Should we go on the next one? Hometown gaming.
Yeah, great topic. Boy, what a good thing.
was.
For sending
Thank
in
you,
that
John from
email.
Iowa.
Sorry, did we have an idea? Did we actually answer that?
Well, you didn't really
You know, I
ask a
think-
question.
Yeah, I think it was more like here's the thing to think on. We had a lot of chewing to do, right? So
Yeah.
you know, and I agree. Like the last thing in the second PPS was like that. You know, John used an analogy between RPGs and software, right? Which definitely is the case. But a lot of that is just not only distribution methods, but just like on the software side, we have so many tools to track what happens, right? Not only with the marketplace, but with our players, right? I'm getting like, you know, and depending on what platform I'm on, instantaneous data almost on what players are doing, what they're not doing, what they like, what they're buying, what they're not buying, right? And you can have this kind of constant, almost real-time tuning of what happens there. So, boy, a lot harder into the tabletop space. So it's like everybody who's making tabletop RPGs, like you're doing God's work, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
You know,
Keep it up.
or some deity's work, Cthulhu, whatever your god is, you're doing their work.
All right. Hometown gaming from Dale. Who wants to read that?
Oh, I only like pre-read the first one, so I have no idea what that one says.
The second
I mean, I
one's
should
short.
do
The third one's a little longer.
Okay, I think I'm gonna do this one.
All right.
All right, Hometown Gaming from Dale. First off, let me just say that I'm enjoying your podcast immensely.
Thank you.
It has made gaming in this dark time much better, especially since I'm only able to meet with my group online right now. That's because online gaming is the best. I have very strong opinions about that. Now, on to the topic. When it comes to historical or even modern or near future games, have you ever run or had an urge to run a game set in the city where you live? Does running such a game hold a special place in your polyhedral hearts, or is it something you avoid at all costs, and why? From my own experience, I have mixed feelings. I've lived in a number of places over the years, but I would never run a game set in my childhood hometown. Running a game set in a larger city I've lived in, like Sioux City or Omaha, I have no problem with. I've even ported the concept of Omaha, historically known as the gateway to the West, into science fiction gaming with the... Or is that science fiction or is that San Francisco?
Probably.
SF gaming.
SF gaming? I don't know.
The idea of
Super
Port
fun?
Omaha. Super
fun
fun.
gaming.
Super friendly. Granted, it can be a bit of a challenge when you're a newcomer or transplant like myself, but if you have good friends and players to help you fill in the blanks for the game lore, it lightens the load and makes the game a labor of love for everyone involved. Thanks for making this dark time a bit brighter and keeping the gaming flame alive.
I will often, even if I don't mention it, base in-game places on places I'm familiar with, because it makes it super easy to come up with stuff, and you can come up with descriptions and tweak them just a little bit and just extemporaneously describe, oh, is there a whatever shop? Oh yeah, there is. It's over here. It's on this little street. There's a little grove of trees out in front of it, and and you can describe actual places, and the players never really figure it out. It's not exactly what he's asking about, but I do that all the time.
But yeah, you've run games that are like actually where you're living.
Yes, I mean the
Places
very
you're living.
the very first actual play we did was Ghostbusters LA, and it was based in Pasadena. It was based at a house that the headquarters of this franchise of the Ghostbusters was like a 3-story Victorian house that's a block and a half away from me. And that's where the game started. And every place they went to was places I'm familiar with because it's where I live. So I've absolutely have done that. I wouldn't have a problem with it. I mean, if you're running a modern game or, a slightly historical game, I think that'd be pretty easy to do.
I mean, there's a reason why Doctor Who happens in Cardiff a lot.
It's where it's
They shoot
filmed?
in Cardiff,
Okay.
Right.
right? So, I mean, there's always in Wales, in southern Wales, right? And so, because they have all the stuff there. And I think that's a great way to kind of run your games. And you can skin it with other things, but, like, this is where all your stuff lives. I think it becomes really easy. And it becomes a lot easier to, like, immerse your players that this is a really real thing, a really real place.
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to, a town that has a bar somewhere, and then maybe there's a house somewhere as well and those are the only two locations they know of.
Right.
I mean, right now I'm running a Monster of the Week game that is set in London, 1887. And the reason I apply this is that I got to live in London for a couple of years, which gave me a completely different viewpoint on like where things are, what's interesting, what's important, what I know I can latch onto, right? And also for that case, like what the history of that city is for what would have been there and what wouldn't have been there, right? In 1887, like interestingly enough, there was actually a complete part of the London Underground built by 1887, though it was using everything from horse-drawn carriages to steam engines to actually traverse it.
Wow.
But if the players are like, we want to get to this part of London, what's the fastest way there? It's like, oh, well, you could take the Underground, right? But it's not what you think it's going to be. It's really different.
Right.
The last session we played ended up with them basically tracking their fears came true that they did actually track a mummy to the British Museum, right? So it's like as you come in the front, as you come in through the side door when you find the unconscious guard and past the Rosetta Stone, you move into the Egypt because like there's a bit of like I know the layout, so I can speak more to the setting, right? Mm-hmm. The thing I worry about, and I'd be interested to know if both of you who've run things in local areas is like I get stressed as a GM over like trying to make sure that it's accurate. So if I say a thing is someplace and it's actually there, right? Even in a Monster of the Week where it's like, so a lot of things, because spiritualism was like huge in the Victorian era, right? And there was an awful lot of con artists that were doing that. We're taking the assumption that a lot of that stuff was real, right? That's kind of the alternate history view I'm taking on for this game. But still, it's like I don't want to say like, oh, you go there. You're like, well, that's not where Parliament is, right? Like, so at least knowing where things really are, which you kind of get to, I think, do more on the fly when it's a place you're making up as you go along.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll absolutely just make stuff up on the fly, just like, all right, well, this is here now. But I also like, I mean, one of the cities I love putting games in is San Dimas, because I lived right next to San Dimas. But also, you guys know this, but not a lot of other people know this who aren't local to this area, right? It's where Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure is set.
San Dimas High School football rules. Woo! Sorry.
They kicked the ever-leading snot out of us. Like, I mean, our football team. I lived in Laverne the next town over, and like we scored for the first time the entire time I was in high school, my junior year, and we lost our minds. We won a game, the last game of the year. We won my senior year, and there's almost a riot, and nobody liked. Well, I should say nobody liked football. The football games are an easy excuse to have something to do, because San Dimas, there's nothing to do. And the entire town is themed Western. And most people don't know that Main Street in San Dimas has these facades up, like these wooden, fake, like old-timey Western facades and there's still like a place where you can buy like shit for your horse and stuff like that.
Oh, man.
So it's awesome. Because what other town in like Southern California is a theme town? So, like stupid shit like that, I enjoy throwing in, because again, like it's not something I would ever think of to do on my own, but because San Dimas, where the high school football rules has this is themed Western, that opens up a whole bunch of other stuff you can do, including people who think that's actually Western times, etc.
Well, isn't Raging Waters there?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Which was Waterloo.
Waterloo, yeah, that in the movie.
And Benelli Park is that big lake that's there. There's nothing to do in that fucking town. It was awful.
Raging Waters.
Has anybody watched the sequel? Has anybody seen the sequel?
Oh, the newest one?
The
Yeah,
third
I
one?
have not
out,
watched
the
it
third
yet.
one?
No.
No, I have
sequel?
not seen it.
Is it
I
any
mean,
good?
I've heard mixed reviews. Some people are like, "Oh, this is exactly what we need in these dark times." Other people are like, "Oh, they're like 60 years old. Why are these dudes like going like, wow, like Like, it was hilarious when they were in their 20s. It's
Right.
really sad now.
Well, I mean,
so.
the original sequel to it was pretty terrible too, with a giant
Yeah.
Martian
Yeah.
butt and.
You know, they probably shouldn't have called it
Yeah.
Pretty Terrible 2. That's your first problem with a sequel. You can get away with Pretty Terrible, but Pretty Terrible 2?
All right.
I don't know.
Oh, that's good.
Um,
Anything else on this, or we can go ahead and go on to the horror story because they're my favorite.
I think,
Yeah.
Ron, yes.
I think we're good.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you for the email. All right,
Thank
I'll
you, Dale.
read a horror story from Eric in New Jersey. I joined a 5e D&D group made of people I enjoy playing with. We had done some 3E stuff in the past, like butt stuff, but for RPG players. And they are close
Wait,
LARPing
three?
friends of
Oh, three. Did you mean 3.5 or actually 3? Because 3 was
three,
only
yeah,
out for
I
what,
imagine
like a
that's like-
year?
I read that as third exit, like 3E. I
No, I.
don't really know what that is.
Wasn't that be the first exit though?
I don't know. It tends to be more.
No, it's the second exit number 2, but I don't know if it's the third exit.
Anyway, they had done some 3E stuff in the past, and they are close LARPing friends of mine. The GM who's running the game checks off a lot of boxes in terms of being willing to use funny voices, because part of his living is doing audiobooks and the like, and greatly being supportive of the players to the point of letting someone completely remake their character to better fit within the functionality of the group. Since in D&D, you have to have certain classes to even survive pre-written modules, it seems. He's a great guy and has several good traits as a GM. Now, I made a bard. You can see how this is going to go. No, not your horny type bard, but somebody based off the band The Who, which is The Who, which is HU. Check out their song Wolf Totem, which, by the way, after I read this email, I went and did, and they are fucking sick. They're amazing. They're awesome. It's like throat singing hard rock. It's amazing.
I think I've seen these guys. I didn't know who it was though.
Oh yeah, they're fantastic. Please check them out. And I came to my first session in eager anticipation. I spent the first half of the day waiting for my character to be introduced. At one point, the GM, seeing my frustration at this, let me play an NPC that was adventuring with them. Well, I played her until she got eaten by something in a large pile of sludge, and then I waited some more turns. And it ends up that the GM was waiting for the players to use a magical device to contact their superiors so that I could be sent as a reinforcement. All in all, I waited half the session to be introduced and to start playing my character. And I didn't hold this against the GM too much because I've made the same mistake of not introducing someone until it was right for the story, when really I should have been more concerned with player engagement. So it wasn't something that I was going to be bitter about. Next session, we ended up fighting 2 golden statues early on. This fight took an hour and a half
Oh boy.
against 2 golden statues.
That's nothing. Well, no, it's 3rd edition or 4th edition?
5e. This is their 5e
5.
game.
Okay. All right.
Right, this is the 5e game. This
had-
is his former third exit LARPers he's playing with, but this is his 5e game.
I've had 4 and 5 hour combats in 4E.
Now, 5th exit.
5th exit. So no wait, Stu. It gets better.
Okay.
I just chalked it up to being D&D, and us being now 5th or 6th level, so I knew some combats were going to drag. Then came the following session. We were trying to retrieve someone who ran away and joined a circus for some sort of blood god. What'd you do?
That sounds awesome.
That's amazing. We got to the circus and saw the beginnings of how they were going to try to sacrifice the poor being we were trying to save. Being the bard, I decided to go to the ringmaster and try to have a conversation with him. At least maybe giving us a few rounds to get into position. Maybe getting the guy without a fight at best. Well, I thought I rolled pretty well, but apparently a good roll is a critical failure because I was told I just convinced the ringmaster that I wanted to be a part of the sacrifice too.
What?
More blood for the blood god. Roll for initiative. Now, to be honest, I felt a little railroaded.
Really?
Then we proceeded to have a fight that lasted the entire session.
Okay, there you go. That's D&D.
Then I reminded myself it was D&D. And after the adventure was over, decided to tell the others that I was not coming back. Because I want to role play, I'm not interested in all this combat. Now the others had a grand old time and I felt crappy that I was so miserable, but it wasn't just scratching the itch that I needed by playing an RPG. Hell, I felt far more engaged in Uncommon Man's Forbidden Lands play-by-post game than I did these D&D sessions. Now, I really don't fault anyone majorly. It's just something where I am not into a certain style of game. Anyway, I hope all is well with you. Stay healthy, stay drunk, and stay diverse. Sincerely, Eric from New Jersey. So, good on you, Eric, for getting out.
Yeah.
Right? You gave it a couple of sessions, and you were like, I'm not saying this is bad, I'm just saying it's not me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also, like, if the guy was also a LARPer, used to, A, talking to everybody all the time, and B, once combat starts, the game's over.
Right.
I mean, there was a vampire game I used to play in, and, oftentimes I'd just be off to the side, wouldn't even get engaged in the main area because, 45 minutes into the game, combat would start, and then it would go for 4 hours. So
LARP, I thought LARP combat went quickly. That's always been my perception.
Not back in the White Wolf days when you're doing rock, paper, scissors and you have like 12 people doing it.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Isn't that like rock, paper, clusterfuck? What is that actually called?
I forget what it's called.
Rochambeau. There's some better name for that, I think.
It's what it really is that if you are friends with the guy who runs the game, you get to win.
Right.
And it's just totally stacked in your favor. If you have you can have all these things that stack in your favor and you just don't lose. So there's no real point in doing it. If you see somebody hanging out with the GM, you just don't fight that guy.
I'm getting more and more interested in LARPing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, sounds very engaging.
No, you know what? I will say right now, I would love to LARP because I'd see some fucking people.
Right.
So I'm in. I'm totally in.
So
Me
LARPing
too.
is awesome if nobody fights, and that's why Vampire set up the way it was, where you'd all be in Elysium and nobody could fight.
Right.
And
and L5R LARPs are almost always Winter Court.
So again, you
For
don't
that very
fight
same reason.
if you set them up in these sort of like situations in which you are heavily penalized for fighting, or just simply killed by everybody.
You know what would be a great LARP then? God, DS9 would make for a great LARP.
Oh yeah.
'Cause
Oh,
there's
yeah.
like, really fighting on the station very
Right.
much, like rarely, very rarely. But
Yeah.
like what a super rich storytelling environment. Okay, now I might be in.
Just make sure you know the
Or
GM
San
real well.
Dimas. San Dimas would be a good LARP too.
Yeah,
It would
Sandra's
be. It would be.
great place to LARP.
Bill and Ted the RPG.
But yeah, I mean, a good portion of D&D 5e, D&D has always been a board game.
Yeah.
And so if you don't want to play a board game, don't play the game.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, it's definitely more so now, right? Or not now. 5e or 4e.
4E was a real board game.
Well,
Yeah.
that was all about I'm moving my miniatures and tactics, right? And
And they made a
It's
whole
just
classification of classes that just manipulated how things moved on the board. Remember, there was the controller. Remember, they had I can't remember what they called them, but there were certain classes that were controller classes, and they moved people or allowed people to move in certain times. There's almost no way you could play that game without a map.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it's really interesting because one of the things that especially now I've enjoyed is being able to play RPGs that are, even though there may be combat, are more focused on that combat being extrapolated in a way where I don't need a map.
Yeah.
Right? It's more like you're close or you're far or you're, I'm going to do this move. Okay, that results in this, right? Where it's more derived from the telling of what you're going to do rather than the tactical placement.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm thinking the next game I want to run is going to be a GURPS fantasy game. Just plain old regular fantasy in GURPS. Once one of the two campaigns ends.
Oh, by the way, Stu, speaking of GURPS, I'm going to send you all the books
Oh,
that
okay.
I have. I don't know if you saw that on our internal Slack, but I have I'm going through and clearing out all this old RPG stuff I have that I'm like not going to use. And I found like a grip of books that were from when we were roommates,
Oh, really?
right? And it's like the Prisoner book and other stuff like that. And I realized I was like, oh, I'll see if anybody like in our inner cabal at Happy Jacks might want those. And then I looked at it and was like, most of these are Stu's. I should just return them. your problem.
So wait, when you say The Prisoner, do you mean like the old TV show?
Yeah.
Oh, Keep talking, boys. I'll go get it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome.
Oh, they did.
Are you
Oh my
serious?
God, they did so many supplements for second and third edition. It was amazing. Yeah, it's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. They did.
I mean,
did you ever read the Hugh Manx novels by Alan Dean Foster? They did.
No, I did not.
They did a world book for that series of books, and it's only like 6 books, and they did a whole world of it. He's got it. He's probably got it right there.
See, I've got the GURPS 1 and 2 compendium.
Right. That
Right.
that fixed the game. Those are the books that fixed the game.
Those are the books that fix the game. I've got GURPS Horror,
Right. A classic book.
a classic, right? The exceptional GURPS Goblins.
Oh,
Which is
I would
like-
love to run a goblin game. That sounds like fun.
And The Prisoner.
Yeah.
Oh, it's awesome.
Which
See, the
was like-
village would be such a great storytelling environment, right?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, and it's great, right? It's like how to run a game in the village.
I mean, Paranoia would be a great system for that too.
Yes.
It is. It probably is the
But
default
yeah,
system.
it's great, right? It's super cool. I've got a couple other books that I'm not getting rid of, like some of the really early GURPS core books, and the Magic book that you guys all signed. To
Oh,
me,
right,
because
yeah.
in the original Magic,
That's one of
expansion for
when
GURPS,
I moved out of La Mirada, most of that stuff I gave to Casey, but I did keep my signed copy from Steve Jackson of GURPS Grimoire, I think.
No, it's
which is
GURPS Magic.
No, well, GURPS Grimoire was the second Magic book for second edition, and that's the one that
Right.
included the spells that we ended up coming up with in our campaign.
Right. Yeah. So it was, but I've got the one that like basically the whole group, like you signed it, and like Stevie signed it.
See, I think when they
Aldrich,
came out with a third edition Magic book, I think they included those spells and also included our credits in that one as well. Because that's when we came up with like some of the technological magic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I got so tired of mages being able to cast teleport to get out of fights that I invented a spell called Teleport Trace, which is a reaction spell that another mage can cast, and it will basically allow them to follow someone who's teleported, and they will end up in a relatively the same position wherever they end up. So
Yeah, there was.
Is it-
We found a lot of broken spells.
Oh, yeah.
In that. Levitation was the one of my favorite.
Oh yeah, it's like I'm going to
Was
send
that
him
apportation?
apportation.
Is that it?
Yeah, I'm going to send him straight up in the air at 1 meter a second for a minute, and I don't have to concentrate on it because it's a regular spell. So
Yeah,
and it has a
and
duration
then-
of a minute.
Who wants to go for shawarma? Let's go.
and a 60-meter fall in GURPS, not necessarily in D&D if you're high enough level, but in GURPS is pretty much always going to kill you.
Can you imagine though if you had a character that's the part of their background was that spell had been cast on them, a party had left, they didn't die, right? And now they're adventuring and they have this like fear of heights, like that you can't even. There's like, oh God, no, I don't trust magic, I don't trust heights. Like what happened? Oh, let me tell you.
And then
There was one of the not Skyrim, but the world that Skyrim is in, Elder Scrolls, Elder
Tamriel?
Scrolls worlds. There was one of the Elder Scrolls games where it was great. You would be out kind of just wandering around, right, and you'd hear this, and you'd see this this figure go boom in front of you and like splat on the ground. You're like, what the hell? And so you'd go over and you'd find there was 2 things on this robed figure, other than their robes, if you want to take them, was like a parchment and a pair of boots. And the boots were like these boots of leaping. And then the parchment was basically this mage keeping notes. It was like, oh, I've got the first part figured out. and if you use the items, you could like do these ridiculous leaps, but then it just built up terminal velocity, right? So you had to keep them until you learned Featherfall in the game, and then you'd use them when you got close and you'd like fire off Featherfall so you could land. It was amazing. It was like the long play. It was so good.
that's hysterical.
As a quick aside, there was an attempt to do like a PvP like Elder Scrolls game that was so buggy, and so like if your race had a bonus to it, sometimes it would give you, instead of like a plus 15 to it, like a plus 15 million. So you would jump, and you would just jump out of like the world. And like, oh man, I jumped out of the world. I mean, when you're shooting people and like your bow kills everything like in one hit, you're like awesome, but I just can't hit spacebar. Because if I hit spacebar, then my game's over. But until then,
You jump into the glitch.
face.
In the Twitch chat, Choose Reality said that was Morrowind. That was the game that was in. Like, oh, I totally did the same thing. Yeah, I love. It's so funny. Like like when you find little things like that, like in any kind of game, I think is great. And I love to always try to put something like that in a tabletop I'm running to. Right? Like, what's a thing they might find that only later are going to think like, oh, what if we did that thing?
Right.
That would be cool. Not always with success, but
It's very rewarding when they actually do connect the dots, though, isn't it? Even though it's rare.
I have simply just given up trying to do stuff like that. Like, I'll give them stuff that will be cool, maybe, but like my players are all like, like you, Bill, in the Traveler game. And you're like, you know
Awesome.
what? We're gonna go like fucking overthrow this this country. All right. Yep. That is exactly what we're doing.
I don't know if that was. I think I was supportive of that plan. I don't know if that was my plan. I will say we were talking. We were talking at some point about reveals, and like one of the things that I love doing, but is a challenge for me as a player, is I always end up writing these like super deep backstories, right? And like I had a super deep backstory for Gen, for that character, right? But I will say the kudo I want to throw you as a GM is that you gave me an opportunity to pay that off for the party, right? And like that's a great thing for a GM to do, right? Is like, and kind of going back to even the last email we had to tie it into the show, is like if you've got a bard and you know that they're going to do that stuff, like give them a moment to shine. Like if that guy could have talked the ringmaster out of that because they were the bard, like that would have been amazing, right? In the Traveler game that Tappy ran, which by the way was the first online game I'd ever played, was our pantsless Traveler game. Because we were like this. We didn't have to wear pants. Nobody cared.
Who would know?
Who would know? Well, we did, because I think we all actually made like a show of like proving we were actually not wearing pants, as I recall, at least on one occasion.
Yes, we did.
Right, which wasn't bad considering a couple of the people that were in that game.
Yes.
Sure.
I will say. But the thing that was really funny about that is that my character had this like very secretive past as basically being a part of like the space Yakuza, right? That's the best way I can put it. And we ended up at one point going to some meeting that we had to get into for some reason, I don't remember why, but it was this like big high-end Yakuza meeting. And everybody was like, oh, how are we gonna get in there? How are we gonna get in there? I'm like, oh, don't worry, I have an idea. And we get there and the guards are at the door and they're armed to the teeth and they're like, you can't come in. And my character always wore the classic like big long trench, and I take it off and he's just tatted. And the Yakuza tats everywhere because as part of his character background, he had like become this like really high level underworld criminal. And so takes it off and they're all like, oh, and they're out of the way, and the whole party's like, what the hell just happened? Right? It's like, the onion just got opened, right? And I was so thankful for the moment to pay that off, because that was like, oh, like all the weird, mysterious, not doing things in front of the party for months just came to the boiling point.
Well, also that was when we first realized that you can do sidebars all the time while the game is going on. So Bill is murdering people without anybody knowing. And
sidebarring on like online chat with
Right.
Happy.
Right? And there's somebody who's going after like Shing's character, and Bill just kind of like pulls them into the shadows and just like shh, while
Slow with
putting
the
the knife into him.
But Shing's character was like the super innocent, kind of like the engineer on Firefly. She was an engineer, right? She's got that thing going. And she was getting harassed. I'm like, oh, and I come in, and my guy's big physically, and I hold this guy off. I'm like, oh, you should go now. You should go. Send her off. Yeah. And then I just like murder the dude, right? But no one knows, and I just come back, and it's like, oh, he will not bother you again. Oh, okay, great, thanks. Okay. Right, so yeah, all this like that is easily Stu, including that game we played where Dave had us play villains.
Oh yeah.
Remember that one? Like. And I did bad stuff with that character, Gen is easily the darkest character I ever played.
Yeah.
Because that guy did so much off-camera stuff that was so bad. And then when we finally got to where he revealed himself, then it was just like I got to do every 80s Schwarzenegger action film idiot thing ever. At one point, I'm holding some other guy in front of me as a shield while I'm shooting over him. It was amazing, right?
Yeah,
I think the thing that was good about that, I'm going to give Tappy one more compliment as a GM, is that I had to, because of real life stuff that came up, I couldn't finish the campaign. We were maybe like 2 or 3 sessions away from finishing. I'm like, I just can't play anymore. So I talked with Tappy about, here's what I think Gen would do to achieve the goal that I think at that point Jessica's character had wanted to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, here's what I think Gen would do. And it was super extreme. It was basically, we're going to come up with a plan. Here's how we're going to execute it. And then you need to give Gen a lobotomy. So if anybody tries to read his mind, it's not there.
It was so intense.
Can't find it. It was super intense and very on character. And so, and then I was like, so however you play him is how you play him, because his personality can be altered by that. And I want him to be a part of the story ending, even though I can't be there, right? And I had enough trust and faith in Tappy as the GM and in the group to, you know, at least have my character, even though I couldn't be there for the last 3 sessions, to be a part of the end of the story, right? And that was all online, right? I think that's a big thing. My big takeaway now is that just because we're forced to have to play our games that normally we love sitting around a table and sharing snacks and seeing people, right, to do, you can still have like really incredible moments in an online game.
And we're kind of fortunate to have a hobby that you can do online. You know what I mean? Because I mean, there are people out there who have hobbies that can't do that, and they just don't get to do it. We can continue to do it. We have to do it a little differently, but we can totally continue to do it, which I'm very thankful for. So, now we should end because my daughter I have something I urgently have to take a picture of, apparently. That she came in during the first email, and that's when I had my headphones off. I'm like, I'm sitting there doing that because she was trying to describe what it is I have to take a picture of. So I'm going to go ahead and end the show.
That sounds good.
Email. Let's see where we go. Thank you for joining us for season 27, episode 10 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
This is Tappy.
And this is Bill, and I want to pour one out for RGB. This is a thing, you know, that we don't talk a lot of politics and stuff in here, and it's not about that. Incredible woman, amazing legacy.
Yep, absolutely. And we'll see you next week, Friday, 7 p.m. Pacific time. Join us then, happyjacks.org/live. Thank you very much.
Program has been a presentation of the Angry Folk Media Empire.